I'm Alad Gilo, one of the co-founders of Reach. Cold Email Hot Takes is a mini video series in which we talk to inspiring sales leaders about their approach to outbound sales. In this week's episode, we're excited to have with us Charlie Phillips. Can you introduce yourself quickly, Charlie?
Absolutely. Charlie Phillips. I'm the BDR manager at Upflow. Upflow is an accounts receivable software, kind of revolutionizing the way B2B companies get paid. We've got a BDR team of 7 that's growing fast. So obviously we have to do a lot of cold outreach via email and calls. So like enabling the most like personalized custom outreach with our prospects, cutting through all the noise out there is always a challenge and something we're always striving to improve.
I love it. So Charlie, you're a fellow American living in Europe, like myself.
Indeed.
So I'm excited to hear your perspective on this. So to ask you, since people, I know at least in our experience, people are continuously just overwhelmed by the kind of cold emails they receive, right? I mean, it's kind of harder and harder to stand out and kind of get noticed from the noise, right? So I'm curious, what are some of the principles you're using at Upflow to stand out from the crowd?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's more BDRs now than ever before. So I think the biggest thing is not sounding like every other marketing or sales email. Perhaps I'm getting a bit too granular with this, but we have like a checklist for what all of our emails should look like. If you're looking for good people to follow on LinkedIn, I'd recommend Kyle Coleman and Josh Braun. I know I'm supposed to be the expert now, but we've definitely like taken our inspiration from them. Things like short subject line, don't be fancy.
Yeah.
We just do like their first name and our first name, right? People have to open it. It's like creating an information gap. Um, Personalization in the first line, making it relevant to them. The big thing stylistically is make them short, lots of white space, and concise, right? Write the way you speak. If you try and sound salesy with long paragraphs, dropping value proposition, you're probably not going to get where because people have a sixth sense when it comes to cold emails. They
Right.
can look at an email and know it's cold straight off. So make it really easy to read. Um, Personalization in the first line, and then it's about starting conversations. So interest-based call to actions, low pressure, don't ask for time. These are some of like the things that all cold emails should have, in my opinion, particularly the first.
Yeah, no, that's actually very close to the format we subscribe to as well. So that's legibility, personalization, keep it concise. I mean, super
Yeah,
concise. I think people always mess that one up.
yeah.
They always think they need to cram all that information in there,
No,
and it
you
ends
don't.
up, yeah, no, don't
I think
resist the urge.
the information gap is key,
Yeah,
right? Like you want to strike the right balance between like being relevant and
right.
wanting them to find out more.
Exactly. That just the first with either your name or their name in the subject line is really interesting. I haven't tried that. So you mentioned the first line, of course, being personalized. So I'm curious. Obviously, you guys are big believers in this. I think you guys have probably nailed down this process. But what are types of personalization that you're doing? And what I mean by that is, you might have kind of company-based personalization, or recipient-based personalization,
Yeah.
or even industry level personalization. Is there something you guys tend to do more?
Yeah, we try and do like we have an ABM account based approach, but we like to use certain events or triggers that are specific to that company. Um, I think you need personalization relevant to their job. So like where their job and your value intersects. I don't like personalization that's just like, hey, we went to the same college or something like that.
Right.
That's not relevant to the task at hand, which is helping them find an alternative solution to a problem they have.
Right.
We use triggers like obviously like conventional ones like job offers or fundraising, things like that a lot of companies use, but you need to frame that as a reason why they might be experiencing a challenge, right? You need to be a mind reader. Like, thought you might
So
have a challenge. Here's a different
right.
way of doing it.
So that's interesting. So one, like you're getting on the fact you're touching the point of kind of relevance, right? Like relevant personalization, right? Which is kind of
Yeah,
the in our view is kind of like the holy grail, right? Like when you there's a million ways to personalize something and make it technically relevant to whoever's receiving it, but to make it relevant to the problem at hand is really what matters, right? So you're like combining personalization with relevance is usually the
yeah,
key to get you that meeting.
yeah. I
Um,
always tell the
it all,
BDRs like, don't no BS, right? No fluff. Like, let's cut to the chase.
Right. Yeah, I like that. It also reminds me of this something that Guillermo and I have been, my co-founder, been reading about recently, which is this concept of kind of hypothesis-based approach to sales, which is kind of interesting. Like as you mentioned, like being a mind reader, right? That you're kind of going after. You kind of have to assume certain or kind of test certain problems that they might be dealing with just by understanding their industry or even understanding their business or the role that specifically that you're reaching out to, and then touching on these hypothetical
Yeah.
problems that hopefully they'll be
Yeah.
experiencing. Um,
Yeah. You have to talk to your prospects as if they're your peers. You
right.
need, that's why I think like BDRs and SDRs, like the conventional wisdom is that they schedule meetings, but like they probably need to take an expert approach, a consultative approach in today's market because it's so saturated. Um, and like showing that what your prospects day to day is like is super important, and conveying that in your cold emails is like paramount.
I love that. So another thing that we consistently think about in our reach is like when and how much to add value in
Mm,
our emails, right? So like, and this is something you probably hear yourself a lot, right? Just like you should always be adding value at each touch point. So I'm
yeah.
curious how you guys approach that. Are you sharing resources? Are you, I don't know, offering certain like unsolicited advice? Or are there things that
Yeah.
you're doing to try to add that piece of value?
Yeah. I feel like there's a spectrum between like adding only value, which is effectively just like a pitch, and then like market research on the other one, which is basically just saying like, hey, here's a challenge that we see. Is this similar for you guys? Right. And you're offering like
Hmm,
no value. And I think
right.
doing A/B testing along that spectrum, but finding the right balance is super crucial. So oftentimes the value that we provide is something that's like basically, like I said this before, is an alternative solution to a pain we think they have. So what we want to do is like uncover and identify a pain and then propose a solution based on that. Now, the solution doesn't have to be like, in our case, hey, upflow. It's more the solution is empathizing by saying, hey, actually, upflow users get this value. I think that's a critical distinction is talk about
Right.
their peers. Your value through the lens of their peers is super valuable. In terms of like
100%.
specific, in terms of the specific value that we provide, I think showcasing visuals of your product in particular is really important in cold outreach. If you can figure out a way to showcase value of your product, even better if it's personalized to them, I think that's very impactful. That way they
So
can see value and
are
see it as
you sorry, are you sending like videos? Are you scanning screenshots or GIFs?
yeah.
Is there something you guys tend to do?
So we did a lot of screenshots in the past. GIFs is something that actually we're experimenting with at the moment. Um, Literally as of like 4 weeks ago, I led.
Nice.
And we're actually getting really good traction. The key thing with that is like deliverability. You need to make sure that you're optimizing it, that the file's not too big.
Right.
Monitor your metrics to ensure that deliverability is key. But I think GIFs are really good. And again, GIFs of something that's valuable, your product, something that's clearly revolutionary about what you're offering, not a GIF of like this classic one, like the gif of the kid who's like waiting like this, and it's like
Yeah.
me waiting for your answer. It's just like like trying to be funny. It's a bit dangerous.
Yeah, I
I like
agree. I'm not yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the super silly kind of playful things that people do. I don't know. I think it's kind of a generational thing that a lot of the really young reps like feel comfortable kind of using these fun things. But it's I do agree that the visuals can be really powerful because of course,
yeah,
you think about somebody's time, instead of having to read through something or trying to understand it, like just seeing it
yeah,
can sometimes just be way quicker.
yeah, and that's what we're
Um,
trying to do, right? We're trying to get them to a demo to see something. So
right.
if we can get halfway there, um, and a picture explains 1,000 words, and like the way they interpret it might not be 100% accurate, but that's okay. You want them asking questions.
Definitely. Definitely. So I'm curious how you guys are doing Upflow, but is there do you guys have like an optimal amount of touch points in your outreach that you found is kind of ideal? Because we've seen a huge range. Some people
Yeah,
cramming in dozens in the span of a week, 2 weeks, and other people,
yeah,
really spreading it out.
yeah.
What is your approach on that?
It's important to note like what types of touch points are in there. Like obviously like if you include calls and LinkedIn, then it's going to be a lot more. If you're talking email, it's going to be less. You hear the conventional wisdom, I think. You see 8 a lot as something that's optimal. You hear like a range of like 6 to 12,
Right.
excuse me, over a course of like a month or 40-day period. That's something that we would subscribe to as well. Probably like a minimum of 6, maximum of like 12 or 13 over like 30 to 40 days. Now with like calls, look, you can probably make a bit more calls, and these aren't as like traceable. You don't
Right.
leave a trace with calls necessarily. From an emailing perspective, through the lens of an emailing, I'd stick to like 2 threads over a 30-day. So like a flurry of emails, like 1 email, 2 follow-ups in like, a week, and then you take a little break and then another flurry. The key thing is like with touch points is like the number of touch points over a prospect's lifespan can be huge. You need to like make sure you give them like a month, 2 months, 3 months, because outbound's all about timing. And
Absolutely.
when you reach out now, they can be super cold, and then you reach out 2 months from now, you have a new intent, you have new information at your disposal, both in terms of what's going on with them and what's going on with your team and your product internally. So it's important to keep that in mind and not be like overly aggressive, knowing that like outbound is about timing and the long haul.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I like that as well. So are you in that kind of two flurry? Is that like programmed using sequences, or are they two completely separate sequences that you're manually triggering yourself?
No, so like our emailing, it's all done through like cadences. And we
Yeah.
usually, like I said, like on the there's a couple ways we can do it. You can include all of your touch points in a single cadence, like email, call, email, or you can
Right.
just like break it down with email and then like call tangentially to that, or like, sorry, in
Yeah.
parallel to that. But I think like 2 threads, basically you take an approach, you know, the first email is critical. You take a certain approach, personalization, follow
Right.
up. Maybe in the third, you ask value. You fill that information gap in the third email, second or third email. You wait a break, and then you take another thread with a different approach. Obviously, you have different angles with which you can like kind of break into your prospects, and you try that in maybe the second half, third or fourth week of the month, and then you'll let it sit for a little bit.
Got it. Got it. Okay, that's an interesting. I like it. We haven't tried that yet. We've been doing kind of more just like standard sequences, and then maybe like reconnect. We'll do like nurturing campaigns. We'll kind of reconnect later in like a couple of months. But I agree that like timing is key. So constantly re-engaging them over time. You never know if like
Yeah,
if the timing is right.
yeah, and so much of this has to do with your entire sales processes. Like,
Of course.
if you have a super mature CRM with like a really developed like rev ops and like business ops team, then like you can work differently than say just like you have like a CRM and some BDRs. You know what I mean?
Right, right. So I'm curious, from like a scale or on a spectrum of kind of pitching right out the gate to kind of starting a conversation, like where would you say you fall? Because we've seen a lot of discussion around this. Like some people are like, don't pitch, you're not supposed to like engage
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Yeah. Look, we lean heavily towards starting a conversation because the worst thing you can do is like assume that your prospect is for everyone, because it's not. Um, I think the ultimate thing about cold outreach is doing it like with humility and not being presumptuous. So like your goal is to like understand, is there a conversation worth having? Do you have pains that we address? Are you thinking about these challenges? Are you looking to make improvements in this space of your business? And I think like that's the critical thing to establish in your cold outreach, because if you pitch, like I said, there's no information gap. It's all laid out on the line, and it's easy for someone to simply opt out. Even if they like it, they might say, "Oh, this is interesting. Like I'll get back to them when I get back." You need to drive curiosity, and you do that
Right.
through not pitching.
Is there a at what point in kind of your initial contact with them and subsequent to that would you try to get them onto a call? Like is it as soon as you see that there's sufficient interest, or is it like in email two, I'm already going to try to push them in that direction? Like what is the, or is it's kind of case by case?
Yeah, I mean, I think as soon as there's interest, you try and get on a call, I think. But it depends on how your sales processes work. I think that it's always good, if you want to be as efficient as possible, is to do like a thorough enough discovery with your prospects. Who conducts that in your organization? It depends on your approach. But I think getting on a call with prospects is like as soon as possible is critical. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
that call is going to be a demo.
Right.
There's
Right.
a conversation to be had for sure.
Yeah. Even a
Um,
discovery can be super valuable.
yeah. The thing is, it's critical to know like when do you pitch that call?
Right.
If you do it too soon, the prospects like wall or zone of resistance will go up. And if you don't ask at all, well,
Yeah.
you have to ask. Don't be shy, right?
Exactly. No, that's that I was getting it. Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have, but this has been super interesting. I'd love to hear how you guys are approaching it at Upflow. And I'm going to follow you and your infinite wisdom on LinkedIn, so we'll get more of those updates. But thanks, man. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Eli.